Welcome to another edition of Anglican Unscripted. This is episode 68. You're watching two of your favorite people sitting down talking about all things Anglican. George, growing popularity, we need to improve our show. We're going to do that by the Hollywood-style nicknames. Now, you've heard of J-Lo and all these great nicknames. It's time for you and I to get some. I'll be Special K. Who are you, George?
I guess I'll be the G-Man. And today is March 22nd, 2013. And this episode of Anglican Unscripted is brought to you by the New Wineskins Conference in Ridgecrest, North Carolina.
George, let's move on to story one. And story one is, well, lots of things. It's been a great week for Christianity on the planet Earth. We have, after just a few short weeks, a brand new pope. His name is Pope Francis. And today, after the enthronement in England, we have a new Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby. And it's my job and your job to really dissect what this really means for the church. And it's a lot of good news, but both of these men have to overcome a lot of things. Justin Welby obviously has many domestic issues and many international issues he has to worry about. Let's start first with the domestic stuff, George.
Well, they should call Archbishop Justin Welby Justin the Martyr. Though most people will think of Justin Bieber, I still think we should think of Justin the Martyr and when we talk about the new Archbishop of Canterbury, because he's facing some major problems within the Church of England. The church is collapsing in large parts of the country. There are some sectors, the Alpha Movement, Holy Trinity, Brompton, some of the Fresh Expressions churches, are some really fantastic alive evangelical congregations in the Church of England. But then there are large areas that are just dead. And in 10 years' time, I don't know what you're going to have left. So the church is crashing. Second of all, they've got the Episcopal infection has spread to England. They're fighting over homosexuality. They're going to be fighting more about women bishops. It's just going to be a tough road ahead for the new Archbishop of Canterbury.
It really is. I was watching an interview with him today with the BBC, and this interviewer was absolutely hostile. It's like he was talking to an atheist. And this guy has no hope in the Archbishop doing anything good for England for marriage equity. Pick your topic. The BBC interviewer thought this guy is going to be the worst guy for the job. Why couldn't we have somebody like a singer from the Rolling Stones be our Archbishop? You know, and these are the interesting things, because the Archbishop of Canterbury doesn't just serve locally in the Church of England. He serves internationally as the Archbishop of Canterbury, first among equals of the primates. And in that, he has to serve an additional job that comes with just as much trouble. The primates, most of whom flew into England today, the Global South primates showed up at the enthronement, but they did not show up for the tea or Indaba afterwards because Catherine Jefferts-Schori was there. And this is just the first step of many problems where Justin Welby's reconciliation isn't going to get a spark in the forest.
Well, on one hand, you're going to have people say, well, the archbishops of Uganda, Nigeria, and Kenya, and their fellows, they just skip the coffee hour after church. And hey, that's an Episcopal tradition to just take off once the last hymn is played. But we've talked to leaders of the GAFCON movement and the Global South movement, and they've told us that, as far as they're concerned, nothing really has changed substantively since the Dublin meeting of primates in 2011. That's where almost more than a third boycotted that meeting because they objected to it being pre-scripted, they objected to having no input into its agenda, and they objected to having the primates meeting being downgraded by Rowan Williams into just another gab fest, whereas the previous 3 or 4 meetings had been substantive meetings where they did something. And because nothing was going to happen at this meeting, and Catherine Jefferts-Schori was going to be there, and it was all going to be peace, love, happiness, hippy-dippy-doo stuff, why show up?
It's interesting because you and I have talked about reconciliation before, and that Justin Welby's main drive in being the Archbishop of Canterbury is to reconcile the church, to reconcile England, to reconcile anything he can touch or bless. And there is a great tenor in reconciliation, but nobody really understands what it is. We've talked about man-level reconciliation, where I will not annihilate you if you don't annihilate me. And today, Justin Welby in his sermon talked about God-level reconciliation, where we first reconcile with God before we can even talk to each other.
See, Kevin, he's been watching our show. He's not been paying any attention to the bloggers out there. He's been watching our show. He understands what we're talking about when he speaks of reconciliation. Or we understand what he's talking about. One way or the other, he gets it. He gets it. We get it.
Well, we don't know if he gets it yet. He can talk about it. He can preach about it. But really convincing everybody else about God-level reconciliation is going to be very difficult because nobody wants to show up and repent.
Well, see, one of the things I think that Justin Welby understands, and please don't pin me down to the exact sentence in the exact sermon where he said this, but my understanding of him, my reading we were sent a copy of his new biography to do a review of, and for a future show we're going to highlight that new book by Andrew Atherstone of Wycliffe Hall. But I've read the biography, I've read his speeches, I've read all this stuff, I've listened to him talk, and the sense I get from Justin Welby is that he doesn't believe that he can fix things. He believes that God is in charge and that his job is to help people connect with the divine to bring them to saving faith in Jesus Christ, even if it's Catherine Jefferts Schori, to allow God to reanimate his church. See, in large parts of the Episcopal Church and the Church of England, and this goes back to the problem the Church of England is facing, it seems like the Holy Spirit is withdrawn. It's gone. The buildings are there, the clergy is there, the structures are there, but the Holy Spirit is missing. Welby understands this and understands that revival and renewal is not something you can do by flicking a switch or having the best idea how to fix it. It's something that comes from God. But to prepare, we have to prepare our hearts to be accepting of that, to confess our sins, to be repentant. And when he talks about reconciling with God, he's talking about the preconditions for this reconciliation among men and women. I think, I hope, I pray.
Well, not all of his writings are consistent. However, I can go all the way back to Cranmer, Crowell, and tell you about all the archbishops and their inconsistent writing. I'm not going to hold him to a higher standard. We need to really look and follow his leadership as the Archbishop of Canterbury to see where he comes out in the end, because as a person who desires reconciliation, it's a journey for him and for those who are going to be reconciled. And we keep Justin in our prayers. Nobody's perfect, Justin's not perfect, and we're all sinners here. Please welcome our new sponsor, New Wineskins Missionary Network. They are advertising their 2013 Global Missions Conference. It's held in Ridgecrest, North Carolina, April 4th through the 7th. Please visit their website for more details. George, let's move on here to story 2. And there's a new sheriff in town. His name is Pope Francis. The conclave that met in Rome, the Vatican, last week elected, his name was Cardinal Bergoglio from Argentina, specifically Buenos Aires, a very poor country that suffered for at least 30 or 40 years from an ongoing economic recession. In there, they have super rich and they have super poor. Cardinal Bergoglio has had a ministry with Protestants and others to the poor in that country for many, many years. He has decided to live as they do, George.
Yes, Cardinal Bergoglio is the son of Italian immigrants, so this may be a first, Kevin, but we have an Italian pope, believe it or not.
Yes, whoa.
But an Italian pope who is a South American, and he's also the first Jesuit. When he was elected Archbishop of Buenos Aires, appointed Archbishop of Buenos Aires, he did not move into the Episcopal Palace, which is a real 19th century palace next to the cathedral. He instead moved into a 2-bedroom flat, which he shared with another retired bishop. And he does his own cooking, cleaning, and laundry. He doesn't go around in a chauffeured limousine. He takes a subway in Buenos Aires. He takes buses. This is a man with a heart for the poor. He's not a prelate. He's not a prince of the church. He's a pastor. He's someone who reaches out to those who has the needs that the world has.
Now, Pope Francis is morally the same as John Paul and Pope Benedict. He has that same conservative Roman Catholic lean to him. However, in this, he is different, and he's sent off this last week. If you watch the European media and the Italian press follow this guy, he has been doing acts of Christ. He's been praying for the poor. He's been today he celebrated Mass in a prison. And it's interesting to see how the press in Europe takes this on, or Italian press. They love this. However, the Pope has a lot of things going against him, George, and specifically this whole celibacy thing and the women clergy thing, and he still doesn't like abortion. I mean, he's great in the mind's eye of a person who serves the poor, but he's still that conservative guy the press is going to hate.
Well, the New York Times doesn't think he's a very good choice because he doesn't share their moral worldview. And basically, he's a regular old Catholic. He believes what the Church teaches, and he upholds that faith. And because of that, he is going to be attacked from now until until he dies or retires, for not being with it, not being on the smart side of history, as you mentioned, on abortion, on contraception, on homosexuality, on women clergy, on married clergy. One area where he may have broken with his predecessor Benedict is on the Anglican Ordinariate. We had a lot of fun with that last week.
We did. You and I are Facebook friends with a very social networked Archbishop, Archbishop Venables, who was the Archbishop of the Southern Cone. He's the Bishop of Argentina. And in as such, he has had time to meet with Cardinal Bergoglio and had discussions and talks. And one day they were having lunch, and Cardinal Bergoglio sits down and says, "I don't know why we need this Anglican Ordinariate. You Anglicans are so cool," or something to that effect. Now, as journalists and friends of Archbishop Venables, we picked up the story. We posted it on Anglican Inc.
We were the first to break the story after Archbishop Venables had said this.
I don't think the Archbishop intended the story to go that far that fast, but from his fingertips to our news site to the world, they pick up, and all of a sudden there's a lot of fear in the world. They think the Anglican Ordinariate is going to collapse, fold, be written out of the Constitution.
Oh, when I say we had a lot of fun with this, I'm not trying to be cruel to the people who were hurt by this, but no. Greg Venables wrote this Facebook post. We wrote an article about it within an hour or so of it going out. And then other people began to pick it up, and finally it got picked up the next day by the newspapers in London, and they had all this stuff about, is the Anglican Ordinariate all over? And meanwhile, we were in touch with Jeffrey Steenson, who's the ordinary, the chair of St. Peter, and former Bishop Steenson, who's a former bishop of the Rio Grande in the Episcopal Church, he's now Roman Catholic, head of the Ordinariate, put out a statement saying, let's not worry because the Ordinariate is established within the Constitution of the Catholic Church, and before we get all upset, let's hear what the Pope has to say and not just rely on what Greg Venables has to say. And we were the first one out the box with that, too. And then Greg Venables had another statement saying, well, we need to remember that my conversation with Cardinal Bergoglio was in the context of how great Anglicans are, not how bad the Ordinariate is. So I don't want to play up that side of things because the new Pope has been a very great supporter of Anglicanism in Argentina. So we'll see how this unfolds. But the Ordinariate folks had a real scare for about a day or two. But they should listen to us and read our website because we've been first on every one of these stories.
Well, it's interesting because Pope Francis offers a great opportunity to help re-identify Roman Catholicism and who it's going to participate with in Christendom. And right away, I don't see them running to London. I don't see them running to America. New York City to find friends. It seems that they're using the Global South friends that they've had for so long. Archbishop Venables is one of them. George, let's move on to story 3, and we're going to start testing the patience of the Anglican UNSCRIPTED audience, both of you. We have a convoluted, complicated story, and it involves the election 2 weeks ago in Tanzania for the new archbishop. We reported then that there was rumors of some conflict and some malfeasance in the election and some money passing hands, and we're going to update the story a little here. George and I have been in contact with people on the ground in Tanzania. We have the translated copy of the Swahili Constitution of the Church of Tanzania that we got to go through, and we can lay out more of what's happened, what can happen, and what should happen. First, what happened, George, we learned that more people voted than should vote.
Yes. Archbishop Valentino Mokiwa lost the election on the third ballot to Bishop J.K. Chimiladea by 4 votes. However, 4 more votes were cast than were allowed by the rules. In other words, there were 4 extra votes thrown in, and that's the margin Valentino Mokiwa lost by.
It happens in Illinois all the time, but...
So I don't know if there were dead people voting in the election, but somebody was voting who shouldn't have. Well, objections were filed, and according to the Constitution, a special synod is made up of the members of the regular synod, and the regular synod in action must be ratified by the bishops, the clergy, and the laity. The bishops are said to have ratified this vote. The clergy and the laity have not, and under the Constitution of the Anglican Church of Tanzania, which we've read and gone through, this means the election is still not valid. Now, 3 complaints have been filed, and up to 12 dioceses have protested the election, but we're now entering into the murky world of church politics. We just don't know how it's going to turn out.
Because Tanzania is strange in many ways, but let's just talk about the 3 different entities. There's the people on the coast who are high church Anglo-Catholic. There's the evangelicals, which were started by the Missionary Society. And then there's kind of another branch of evangelicals that are tribal. And there was a point a couple years ago that they were going to try to split the church into 3 provinces. And all this stuff is minutia under the surface where people will work together up to a point. But we've talked to people who say that, you know, one of the reasons this vote was the way it was is because some dioceses were not paid enough money, George. What's the story there?
Well, the Wagogo-affiliated diocese, that's a tribal group, they are heavily supported by the Episcopal Church. The Diocese of Central Tanganyika, Bishop Godfrey Mogolo, receives a lot of money from New York and Atlanta and the National Church. And those dioceses that are of Wagogo ethnicity are pretty much in line with the Episcopal Church. They want to break with GAFCON. They want to continue the relationship with the Episcopal Church. They don't care about the gay bishops and gay clergy. It's nothing to do with them. They just want to keep the relationship with the Episcopal Church alive. They have been against Mokiwa from the very beginning. They want to break the province into 3 and have their own Wagogo-based province. Mokiwa, from the very beginning, has fought against splitting the Tanzanian church in 3. And he is backed by his coastal group, which are the High Church. This time around, that CMS-affiliated group of dioceses that sort of float between the 2, the Wagogos and the High Church, they sort of split down the middle. And one diocesan delegation has now said they want to take their votes back from Chimiladea because they didn't receive enough money to vote for him. They found that other dioceses were paid more to drop Mokiwa and vote for Chimiladea from the American cash, and they think that's unfair, so they want a new vote to get because they're annoyed.
Well, that's the funny thing here. People go, well, why isn't this being reported in the press? Well, because it's so complicated. You know, we can't just tell you there was malfeasance in an election because that doesn't mean anything. You have to get the whole minutia of what's going on here. And, you know, this is a colony that was colonized a long time ago, and now the trouble hasn't just started to seep, it's been seeping for a long time.
Well, I want to press back on it, why it has been publicized. Yeah. It has been publicized in the Swahili press in Tanzania, and there have been some pieces written about Archbishop Mokiwa that are really nasty, accusing him of incompetence. Not corruption, mind you. Nobody has ever accused Mokiwa of corruption. He's squeaky clean on that count, unlike some other Tanzanian bishops. However, Mokiwa is not touchy-feely. He's not a good politician, and he didn't go work the crowds before the election. And there have been some nasty stories in the Swahili press about him, and there are stories about this controversy in the Swahili press. However, the reason why it's been quiet is Archbishop Ramadhani, the former Archbishop of Tanzania, who is from the coast, is an Anglo-Catholic, and is an ally of Mokiwa, has said, look, let's keep this in-house. Let's not wave our dirty laundry in front of the world because it's embarrassing, it makes us look bad, and it just gives more stones for the Muslims to throw at us. So one of the reasons why it's not been pushed out there on the international scene is that because only people who are doing investigative reporting, like Anglican UNSCRIPTED, Anglican Inc., they're the only ones who know about it because they look for it. Nobody's putting out press statements.
Now, let's get on to what happens now. Now, there's more dioceses that are going to file complaints against the election, and they have to sit down and remediate this. A couple things could happen. The former archbishop could say, listen, I don't want to press this. Let's go on and celebrate the election of the new archbishop. The new archbishop would say, yes, there's been problems with the election. Let's have another election. Those are things that could happen. However, if there's no remediation, they can go to court. Now, let's talk a little bit about Tanzania court systems. I have to be kind of careful here because I plan on traveling in Tanzania in the future. I have heard rumors.
Hypothetically speaking.
Hypothetically speaking, that
it has been alleged.
It has been alleged that money can influence a judge or a new car or whatever. So basically, you're going to win the case if you have the most money. Now, that's sad, and it's just what I've heard. If you see me in my passport in Tanzania, I'm not reporting facts, just hearsay. However, there is that issue that even if you go to court, you may not get the right resolution because you don't have enough money.
And also, one of the differences between the Tanzanian court system and the American court system is once you're in, you cannot get out till the judge gives you a final decision. In other words, in the American system, you can settle out of court once a suit starts. You can just withdraw the complaint. You can't do that in Tanzania. We saw this in the case of Bishop Stanley Hote in the Diocese of Mount Kilimanjaro. Bishop Hote was elected bishop, and the loser said, wait, he's not yet 40 years of age, and you have to be 40 to be elected a bishop, and he doesn't have a birth certificate, and he looks 39 to me, and so I'm going to sue. Well, he sued, and Stanley Hote was able to provide incontrovertible evidence that he was over 40 years of age, and the other side said, well, you're right, I don't want to have to keep paying the lawyers, I look sort of stupid right now. He couldn't back out, and so it took a whole year to work through the Tanzanian system before it was where the judge says, you're 40 years old, Stanley. Happy episcopacy.
That's right. Thanks, Mom.
So in other words, if this goes to the civil court system, both sides are going to have to fork out money until the judge makes a final decision. And they don't know if they want to do that because that just throws everything into chaos for a year, 2 years, 3 years.
Prediction. Anglican unscripted prediction. You're going to start to see this in the secular and Christian press now. The story's been going on, and they're going to start picking up, not because they want to, not because they have to delve in and explain all the Tanzania politics, but because it's an unavoidable story that there's a reason we do things right, and it's, because we're Anglicans? No, it's because we're Christians. Welcoming, not the first time, not the second time, but many times, Peter Auld from England. You're not in Canterbury today.
No, I'm in the city of Westminster, which is posh talk from about half a mile from the Houses of Parliament, Lambeth Palace, Westminster Abbey, and all that kind of places.
Okay, we're going to talk today about a place called Jersey. Here's the graphic of where it is. Well, here's England, and here's the graphic of Jersey. You'll see that it's an island, and it's not really part of England, and they're kind of glad for that. They've enjoyed their independence. Sometimes the French claim them, sometimes the English claim them, but they're off there in the middle of the water, and they say, nobody touch us.
Yeah, Jersey is one of the 4 Channel Islands off the west coast of Normandy in France. That's where the D-Day landings happened. It's historically part of the Duchy of Normandy, and it's the only part of the Duchy of Normandy that still belongs to the monarch. But it is not part of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. It is, in some senses, a separate country. It's called a crown dependency. And their relationship goes straight to the Queen as the Duke of Normandy and doesn't go through the Westminster Parliament. So they're not responsible to the Prime Minister at all. They go straight to the Queen.
they've made news. They've made Anglican news this week.
Yeah.
Specifically, they have a dean who has been told you are no longer a dean by a bishop in the Church of England. Now, for the island, for reporters, for England, this is kind of cool. They're going to find out who's who, what's what rules apply to whom, and can an English bishop tell a dean in Jersey what to do?
This is really interesting. The Church of England in Jersey is annexed to the Diocese of Winchester in the Church of England. So it kind of belongs to the Diocese of Winchester. And the Bishop of Winchester is its bishop. But it has its own canon law. It has its own relationship with the states of Jersey, which is the name for the government in Jersey. And it has its own rules as to who does what and where they belong. So the Dean of Jersey is the most senior clergyman on the island. And he receives letters patent from the Queen, which appoints him as the Dean of Jersey. And as the Dean, he's the most senior clergyman, but also he sits by right of those letters patent in the Parliament of Jersey, which is known as the state. He doesn't have a vote, but he sits there and makes speeches, and he's involved. But as soon as the letters patent are issued to the Dean, the Bishop of Winchester then sends him a letter of commission, and he becomes the bishop's commissary in Jersey. So at that point, from the bishop, he carries out episcopal functions in Jersey. Now, by that, I don't mean confirming and ordaining, because bishops can do that, but rather doing installations, visitations, things like that. He does that on behalf of the Bishop of Winchester. And that arrangement has been happily going on for decades, interrupted only by things like the Second World War, when the Channel Islands were occupied by the Germans for 5 years or so, until the last week or so. In the last week or so, a report was published by the Diocese of Winchester into the Dean and his alleged mishandling of a safeguarding issue. And the story is to do with a vulnerable adult, so a lady in her 20s or 30s, who claimed to be autistic, who was homeless on the island, taken in by one of the church wardens. And she then claimed that he was a bit too tactile with her. Now, when you read the report, when you talk to people on the islands, we're not talking any gross sexual abuse. We're not talking hands on places that you don't have those. We're just talking perhaps a hand on the waist or stuff like that. I mean, if you don't want it, you don't want it, but it's not, we're not talking like the serious kind of sexual abuse that we had in Chichester Diocese.
Sure.
So the report was an investigation into, did the Dean, when this complaint, when this allegation was made to him, did he carry out the proper processes? Okay, and the report claims he didn't. Okay,
well,
now
real quick then, does the Dean answer to the Jersey canons, or does he answer to the Diocese of canons?
Well, this is the argument.
Huh.
What the Bishop of Winchester said was, I'm going to suspend the Dean until I can get another investigation to work out exactly what happened and do a formal disciplinary process, possibly. Okay? That's what the bishop said. Hang on a minute, said the clergy in Jersey. You can't do that. Because the Dean derives his authority as Dean not from the commission from the Bishop of Winchester. This is the argument of the clergy, but from the letters patent coming from the Queen, right? He works for the Queen, right?
Right.
So that's the conflict. But it goes deeper than that, because what you want to ask yourself is, who is the ordinary on the island of Jersey? Okay, now for Anglicans, we understand this, or at least we should. The ordinary is a person who has ordinary power. So basically, where does the buck stop? And in most Anglican dioceses, the ordinary is the bishop, okay? But the canons of the Church of England in Jersey, which, as I reminded you, are not the same as the canons of the Church of England. the canons of the Church of England in Jersey say that the bishop is the ordinary over all people and places except for local law and custom. And local law would be a Jersey ecclesiastical law and Jersey civil law from the states, right? And so the argument of the Bishop of Winchester is, and it's a fair argument, is when he issues the commission to the dean, he becomes his boss. So if there's a safeguarding breach, he can discipline him. But the argument coming from the clergy in Jersey, and more crucially today from the Solicitor General, who's the chief lawyer for the government in Jersey, so for the civic authorities, imagine the Supreme Court diving in and giving a judgment. The argument from them is that the only disciplinary method on the island of Jersey for clergy is via the ecclesiastical court in Jersey. And so therefore, they argue, the Bishop of Winchester cannot suspend the dean. And furthermore, even if the dean did breach the safeguarding regulations, and there's a dispute as to whether they apply to the island of Jersey, because remember, it's not part of the Diocese of Winchester, it's annexed to the Diocese of Winchester, even if the safeguarding regulations apply, a breach of them should be handled not by the bishop, but by the ecclesiastical courts in Jersey. Complicated.
It is complicated.
It strikes to the heart of the relationship between Jersey and the mainland. Because Jersey is furiously loyal to the crown, and therefore the dean being employed by the Queen is really important. So the idea that the bishop can suspend him strikes to the heart of the constitutional settlement in Jersey. And that's why now the chief minister, the solicitor general, are all involved in what could be, if it's not sorted out, a major, I've been told by a senior lawyer in Jersey, a major constitutional crisis for the whole island of Jersey and its relationship with the mainland.
Well, in my mind's eye, I'm looking at this and I see this is how not to do border crossing, which we talked about last week.
Well, I don't think it's to do with border crossing at all. I think it's to do with clarifying where authority lies and where the chains of accountability are. And obviously, the Diocese of Winchester has a different view to that than the states of Jersey and the clergy chapter in Jersey. But because Jersey is, to all intents and purposes, a different country to the United Kingdom, so the bishop is the bishop in two different countries, and in each of them, the relationship between church and state is quite is different and intertwined. This is really complicated, he said, scratching his nose. Sorry, itchy nose, guys.
That's
Do
right,
apologize.
that's right.
Yeah.
It's amazing when you turn that red button on, the face gets itchy. It's weird.
Oh, yeah, and you start, and you want to start coughing and so on. So yeah, Kevin, it's really complicated.
There's another thing happening this week in England. It's kind of a low level thing.
Yeah.
You're having some type of enthronement installation type thing with a Justin Welby. Are you going?
I'm not. I didn't get an invite. Instead, I got invited to a media reception at Lambeth Palace last week on Monday, which was fun. So I mixed with the great and the good and the downright evil in one of the function rooms in Lambeth Palace, and I actually got to chat to the Archbishop for a moment, and that was fun. And he's a really nice bloke. And I'll tell you what, his wife is lovely.
Yes, okay. Now, does he watch the show?
You know what? I didn't have time to ask him. But I suspect he might do. Justin's kind of cool. So, you know, he's certainly aware of me. He knew who I was. It's a bit scary, I guess. I wonder whether he might do. I'll drop his press officer a line and see if he does.
Cool. Thank you for your report this week, and catch you next week.
God bless, Kevin.
Welcome to a special edition of Anglican Unscripted. I have once again David Old, all the way from Sydney, Australia. Now, A lot of you don't know this, but David has a family. He's a rector down in Sydney, but he's taken a different job. Where are you moving to?
Well, I was at a little parish called Neutral Bay on the harbour at Sydney. I've just accepted a position to be rector of Glen Quarry Anglican, which is in the southwest of Sydney, slightly different demographic. We are really looking forward to being there. Some great guys who've been without a rector for more than a year now, and they've been getting on with doing gospel work, and we're excited to go and join them and serve them.
Now, many people here in America know you because you work for a blog called Stand Firm.
Well, when you say work, if they ever paid me a salary, that would be work. But yes.
So there's dissension.
No dissension. We knew what we were signing up for.
So you volunteer your time and services for
That's right.
Stand Firm. What are some of the hot topics the last few months?
Stand Firm. Well, obviously the big topic at the moment, I'm sure your viewers are aware of, is statements made by Tory Borkham, the rector of Truro Church in Virginia, and his vestry. Tory has himself entered into a process of what he calls reconciliation with Bishop Shannon Johnston of the Diocese of Virginia, who, remember, sued them, and they left because of what they thought was a heretical position of the Episcopal Church. Borkham is now making overtures. More than that, he and Shannon Johnston are chumming up, and there's nothing wrong with being friendly, of course. I think it'd be very Anglican for us to be very polite to those we disagree with, but what he's actually done is more than that. He's called Shannon Johnston a bishop who holds exactly the same views over which Truro left. He's called him a fellow brother and a faithful minister, and gone with him to conferences in the UK in particular, and promoted Johnston's ministry. He's promoting the ministry of a false teacher, and that's caused some uproar in the blog sphere. We probably ourselves are quite outraged about it. I think rightly so, and that'll be an ongoing story that I think over the next few months we'll see go all the way through.
Well, it's interesting because we report the story as journalists, you report it as bloggers.
Yes.
And there's a different take on how we report the story.
Yeah.
We kind of look at it as the process of redefinition of words. Reconciliation doesn't mean reconciliation anymore.
Yeah.
And if you look at the process he's gone through with Shannon, it more looks like love your enemy than it looks like reconciliation.
I think it's worse than that. He's not simply loving his enemy. He is giving a home to a false teacher. Mm-hmm. He's giving him hospitality and promoting him. So it's right to love your enemy. Cranmer himself, my personal hero, I think I've said that before on Anglican TV, Cranmer himself was very big. We should love our enemies and love those who persecute us. So quite right to do that, to pray for Johnston, to meet with him, to be cordial towards him, but to promote him as a false teacher. And yes, that's the difference. So you're reporting on it, and I've been watching the stuff you've reported. It's been great stuff, Kevin. We are, I think, rapidly becoming part of the story. Yeah.
Well, rule number one, don't be the story as a journalist.
Oh, well, as a journalist, but we're bloggers, so yes.
Now, we've lied to the people here on Anglican UNSCRIPTED.
We have slightly.
Yeah.
Just a little bit.
You are not in Sydney, are you?
I'm not, so I almost want to go, time to kangaroo down sport, put shrimp on the barbie, but actually no, because here's actually what's going on. Should we do it for them?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, here we go. Yeah! Ooh!
All right, so he's in the Anglican TV studios.
I'm here with you.
In the middle of Thomaston with Kevin in the flesh. You've taken a 7-week trip through America with your family.
It'll be about 8 weeks by the time we're done. Yeah.
You started off over in California.
In San Francisco.
San Francisco.
Yeah.
This is week 7. You're here on the plains of Connecticut.
And, hey, they're hills. Listen, I've been driving up and down these hills. Yeah.
And now you're off to England and then Spain. What's it like to take that amount of time off and spend it with kids?
Fantastic. So when I knew I was coming to the end of the position I've been at, and we knew we were going to go to something new, we said it's just a great time to take a break. Mm-hmm. We've sort of been nine years on the trot doing stuff in Sydney, and it's good to, our first incumbency would be good to have a good break, and we had this pipe dream about 6 months ago, my wife and I, and we said, what if we drove across the United States? And I went, yeah, no, ridiculous. But then actually we thought, we could do it. We could do it. So we've done it, and we started off in San Francisco. an enormous SUV and put our 3 kids in the back. I think it's so big they almost can't touch each other, which is great when they're traveling with kids.
It's a priority.
And we just set off and we've seen some amazing things. We've seen the Sierra Nevada, we've seen Utah, Temple Square, we've been down in Arizona, seen canyons, we've been through just the depth of New Mexico and parts of Texas. That's boring to drive across.
It's boring, long, and tedious, and pointless at times.
Well, it was
to get from one place to the other.
That's exactly what we did. And then we actually got to Santa Fe, and I realized I was only about a half an hour from the Trinity test site place, and yet didn't go there, carried on. Did Dallas, saw where Kennedy was shot, went out to Louisiana, saw Mardi Gras, been up to the Delta in Mississippi, shot lots of guns, been to Florida where the big man with the big ears, rains, took for our kids, you understand, not for me, because I've got no interest in Disneyland. And then up the eastern seaboard into New York State, Manhattan with you, and we're going to finish off at the seat of treason in Boston.
Yeah, kind of weird you go there, but you're for those who don't know, you're not native to Australia. You're actually native to.
I'm going to drink my big American coffee.
You're native to Sheffield, England.
That's right.
Now, Sheffield is on the map right now. Peter and I talked about it last week on Anglican UNSCRIPTED as for border crossing. Now, the classical understanding of border crossing is you have a heretical bishop. There's a call from the people in that diocese for somebody to have oversight. A bishop will bring in a clergy, and thus starts the process of throwing a lifesaver to the people in that diocese. There's some question about whether a replacement bishop is enough to stop the border crossing.
Yeah, I think Peter's argument was until the local bishop demonstrates himself to be heretical, that nothing ought to be done. I have a lot of sympathy with that argument, except I don't think it properly gets to grips with the nature of what's going on in England, where the Church of England is different in that most of the decisions are made nationally across the nation rather than in the individual diocese. So here in Tech, we've watched individual dioceses embrace the same-sex marriage issue and go to it and endorse it and promote it and all the other nonsense that they do. In England, these things tend to happen just across the whole board as a whole. What General Synod does, that's the key issue. And so, in one sense, what you're seeing in Sheffield, whether you think it's right or not for them to do it, and I've still got questions about that, but you're actually seeing an expression not about the Bishop of Sheffield. It's actually not about him at all. It's actually an expression of lack of confidence in the Church of England as a whole. Now, whether they're right to do that or not is a different question, but I think that's probably that would be my observation on reflection.
Okay. Now, as we close out this little segment, you've offered anybody who watches Anglican UNSCRIPTED to stay in your place in Sydney, which is really kind of cool.
I don't remember doing that. I don't. Sure, when you pass through, you and your wife and your kids. Yeah.
So.
Well, it was your wife I made the offer to.
That's right. Sorry, Kevin.
We like her.
Yeah, I know. It happens all the time too. They're like, boy, Kevin really married up, and I did.
Yeah.
So thank you again for your time and stopping by the Anglican TV studios, and it's going to be really interesting to see the stories that appear in Stand Firm, especially covering the new Archbishop, covering the new Pope, and the
new Pope. So much stuff.
I know, and the new stuff going on with reconciliation and what it really means. I'm Kevin Carlson.
I'm David Auld.
George, on to our next story, and I don't want to toot our own horn here because I like doing that. But the reality is there's stories you're only going to find here on Anglican UNSCRIPTED and only going to find in Anglican Inc. because we're either brave enough to post them, dumb enough to post them, or we actually get some good intel and can post stuff before you see them in a week or two. Tell us a story that we're going to see next week, George.
March 17th, the largest Anglican congregation in South America, St. Paul's Cathedral in Sao Paulo, quit the Anglican Episcopal Church of Brazil. It and 2 other congregations withdrew from the church and are now freestanding Anglican entities. They say that because they were founded by the Church of England about 150 years ago, they have the right to quit the Brazilian church, which was founded by the Episcopal Church of the USA in the 1890s.
Have they not heard the Dennis Canon? I mean, sorry, but I thought Tech had a lot of influence down there. Certainly they're going to be fighting this in court.
Well, this is a breaking story, and we don't have all the details, but we do have the letter from the cathedral saying they're out of here. Add a further twist to all this. They say they will remain under the oversight of a bishop, and they say 2 bishops. They've chosen the former primate of Brazil to be their bishop, and they're going to keep some sort of relationship with Bishop Bird, who's the bishop of Sao Paulo, of the Brazilian church. But they're not going to be part of the Brazilian church. Now, why is this a big deal? Is that this is the cash cow of the Brazilian church. This one congregation is bigger than most of the other dioceses of the church, and they're pulling out. And after Recife pulled out, 90% of the clergy, 90% of the people, almost everybody who was anybody in that diocese up with Robinson Cavalcante left the church 6-7 years ago. Now you've got a split within the liberals. And this time I think it's over money.
Yeah, I think it's going to be over money. It's going to be interesting because when Recife left, they grew. They doubled their size. It'll be interesting to see if this church also doubled in size in the next couple of years. It's going to be an ongoing story. It's a story you saw first on Anglican Unscripted. George, for the longest time, the Episcopal Church has been an enemy. It's been an enemy to the gospel. It's caused a division within the church and the formation of the Anglican Church in North America. Anglican Church in North America is a group of common cause partners and people in dioceses who have looked at the Episcopal Church for the longest time as an enemy. And they're now to the point where there are still ongoing relationships and relationships being formed with people who belong in the Episcopal Church. What do you do when you want to be friends or love your enemy? And the Episcopal Church has, certainly throughout time, had ecumenical councils and met with people that were not of the same faith, and has had this tradition of being able to handle these uncomfortable situations. This is kind of new to ACNA, where, the Episcopal Church is our enemy, but there are people within it that we want to continue to work with or set up new relationships with. Tori Balcom, who is the priest over at Truro, which is a ACNA congregation in Virginia, tried to set up a relationship with Shannon Johnson, the Bishop of Virginia. They found they had things in common. I don't know if they golfed together, but they found each other in common and struck up a good friendship. Now, people in the blogosphere and the pressosphere, that's us, look at these things and say, what's going on? And even in Anglicanism, people look and say, well, what's going on? I thought you guys were enemies all this time. And people like then Archbishop-elect Justin Welby says, wow, this is a chance to reconcile the whole church. Look, if Bishop Shannon Johnson, a heretic, and Tori Balcom of the Anglican Church of North America can be friends, we can all be friends. Call somebody. Let's get this working. And so here we are, George. There was an opportunity here for something to happen, and I think everybody looked at it and got the wrong idea of what was really happening.
Well, there are a lot of suppositions and assumptions that were made about this relationship that were not true and that were pressed upon it by outsiders. People invested a great deal in this relationship who were not part of the relationship, and that basically caused it to break apart. First off, the Episcopal Church is not the enemy of the ACNA. There are some Episcopalians in high leadership positions who are the enemy of the ACNA. I'm an Episcopal priest. There is no purpose or point whatsoever in me in the Diocese of Central Florida leaving to join the ACNA. And those people who say that because you're in a good, safe diocese, you still have to leave, they have a very high church understanding of what it means to be an Episcopalian, which is not historical, which is not the way it works. Now, that is the theological understanding that they bring into this sort of relationship. And second, they bring into this issue of demonizing people rather than issues. In other words, our enemy is not Shannon Johnston or Bob Duncan or Catherine Jefferts Schori or George Conger or Kevin Kallsen. Our enemy is Satan. People may hold bad views, but they're still people who we should reach out to and love. And that's what Tory Balcom was trying to do. Yet, he was pilloried by some people on the conservative side for being in bed with a heretic because he breathed the same air and all this stuff. I just think it was terribly unchristian, and I think it was a PR disaster for the ACNA. It showed that they had not developed parameters in which to work with people of different faiths. I can play golf with my local rabbi friend. I can play golf with the local Catholic priest, but I know I can't put him in the pulpit. I know what the parameters are because the Episcopal Church has been doing this for 150, 200 years. ACNA has only been doing it for 4 years, and they have not had these problems yet.
No, and that's the difficulty here is nobody's blaming the ACNA. I mean, this is new territory. How do you look at the Episcopal Church and the leaders of the Episcopal Church and people like Bishop Shannon Johnson? And I understand the tendency to say let's not touch anything. I understand the tendency to say let's set up friendships and love our enemy. And I understand the tendency to see if we can seek reconciliation. And the problem that we run into is, what do the people over in England think, or what do the people in Africa think? We always have to keep a world view of what's going on locally. And if Justin Welby looks at this and says this is an example of reconciliation, yeah, that's a problem, because maybe it really isn't, and we shouldn't really be putting all these tactical. Yes,
Kevin, you're absolutely right. And the point that I want to harp in on is that other people decided to create this as a model of reconciliation when Tory Balcom was trying to live out the Christian initiative to love your neighbor, to turn the other cheek, to reach out in friendship to those who persecute you, which is different from reconciling two denominations.
yeah.
And it was unfair for that emphasis to be put on this relationship. I have never argued anyone into believing about Jesus Christ. I've prayed for people, I've acted, I have brought people to a saving faith in Jesus Christ, but I've never logically argued with them, nor have I ever gotten anybody to believe by calling me a heretic or a witch or a horrible human being because they believe bad stuff. You have to love people to save them. You can't dump on them and expect the world to change.
It's interesting. I mean, blogs serve a wonderful purpose in communicating, getting opinions out. I have great respect for all the people in the Anglican blogosphere, and great respect for all the people in the press corps of the Anglicans. This thing, I think, is going to go down in history as a lost opportunity, because we all looked at it and we didn't know what to make of it. George, let's close out the show. I just got back from Chicago. I attended the Anglican 1000 Summit. 2013 is the official title. Had a lot of fun, lots of great church planters. I got to go to Church of the Resurrection, which was an incredibly brand new church. They just put it together in November. It's an old warehouse. It's got a cool sanctuary, the biggest baptismal font I've ever seen, and all these breakout rooms. If you want to have a big meeting, that's probably the place to go. Actually, you can't, because they're not paying for this advertising. Ignore what I just said. Real great church, though. Okay, George, next month you and I are off to New Wineskins Conference. We'll be doing some camera work, and it's going to be a lot of fun, right?
Oh, I'm looking forward to it very much. Some wonderful speakers, great crowd, and it's my first trip since my surgery. I'm really excited.
How's it going? A lot of people may or may not know you had surgery for spinal stenosis, and you've had some, I don't know if it's nerve damage, but the surgery has left you partially paralyzed in your left hand, and you have trouble walking, but you're healing, right?
Oh yes, every day I'm getting better. I've got a wonderful schedule. I do physical therapy, and I do work, and I sleep 12 hours at night. It's a great time. Not making any money, because my output's really cut back a lot, but I've been able to restore a lot of the lost strength, and now I'm working on manual dexterity, learning to write again, learning to walk again. hope to be able to type soon and play the keyboard and be able to manipulate my fingers and do, like right now it's difficult for me to get my wallet out of my pocket because I can't move my fingers in such a way as to manipulate it in a closed thing. It's difficult to button my pants or my shirt. But I'm learning, again, all these things, and just praise God. It's wonderful to see improvement every single day.
That's great. Last time you and I went to Ridgecrest, it was for the Assembly for the Anglican Church in North America. We had a meetup where we met in one of the upper lounge areas with fans of Anglican UNSCRIPTED. It was a great time to converse with people who watch the show, see what they like, don't like, and just had a great time and opportunity of fellowship. And I thought we'd offer the same this time, George. We'll be more specific about a date and time, but that was pretty cool.
Oh, it was wonderful. A number of the people who came and joined us were longtime friends, people we've known, you and I've known for years and years. Others were people who were fans of the show who we got to meet for the first time. It was really wonderful to be able to meet and talk with people and share what we were about and what we hoped to be able to accomplish, and to hear what people wanted to hear about us and from us and the issues they wanted us to address.
Yeah, we gave a lot of the behind-the-scenes stuff and some of the embarrassing stuff, and people really kind of discovered who we really are, and hopefully you still watch the show.
This one woman said, "You and Kevin are really like the people in real life, like you are on TV." And yes, we are. That's who we are. We're not actors.
No, just ask our wives. We are that nuts. I'm Kevin Carlson.
And I'm George Conger. And you've been watching episode 68 of Anglican Unscripted.